Global challenges need pressing action, and I want to play my part. Where can I find solutions to invest in?
I have developed an effective model, but how can I find partners to help me turn it into a sustainable solution?
Solving problems, this is what I do every day. How can I share my entrepreneurial skills and participate in tackling the major issues of our time?
I've worked with many smart and talented leaders over the years. What if I could connect the talent of people from here with ideas from there?
Now is the time to change. We need to rethink our traditional models of philanthropy. How can we push the boundaries and look for new approaches to deliver long-term impact? By innovating, learning, collaborating, and being more creative. Together, let's conquer the new frontiers of philanthropy.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and a very warm welcome to this second edition of the Philanthropreneurship Forum, hosted, of course, this year in Versailles, a historical landmark of French culture. A very special welcome to His Excellency Ammar Al-Dabbagh, CEO of Al-Dabbagh Group and founding chairman of this forum, Your Excellency. We welcome our chairs this morning, our co-chairs, Mr. Doug Band, Professor Rajesh Chandy, Her Excellency Rashida Dati, Mr. Paul Polman, Miss Liz Robbins, Princess Corinna Suzanne Wittgenstein, and Dr. Laura Tyson. We're delighted to have all of you with us as our co-chairs. Thank you very much for being with us today. My name is Kate Silverton. I'm a journalist and broadcaster, and I was thrilled to be invited to be part of the forum last year, and I'm very privileged to be here again for this second forum and to help guide you through what will be a very exciting day. Thank you. The Philanthropreneurship Forum is unique. It aims to foster a new generation of philanthropreneurs and champion new ways, as we heard in the video there, of thinking about philanthropy, development, doing the right thing in a more impactful way. This year the forum has the theme New Frontiers of Philanthropy. So it'll cover things such as the new trends emerging from the philanthropy scene, things we're already seeing being done, philanthropy and social enterprise in emerging countries, how philanthropreneurship is at the forefront now, really at the forefront of achieving those all-important global goals, and ultimately how we all need to redefine corporate giving. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in this room today, we have over 320 delegates from approximately 40 countries. It's quite some feat bringing you all together. Thank you very much for being here. Many different voices then being brought together, practitioners, academics, non-profit organizations, the corporate and public sector. One thing, of course, linking all of you is that you all share the same spirit, the belief that entrepreneurial approaches to philanthropy play an increasingly important role in addressing social and environmental issues. Now, before we start then, just informally, let's talk about the day itself. You've got, to help you make the most of your sessions, I hope you've all had a chance to have a look through your welcome packs and the information that you've been provided. You'll find full details of the program, that's in the program book. And do, of course, use social media. Feel free to use social media throughout the day. The hashtag is hashtag TPF15. You can see that there. And Facebook Philanthropreneurship Forum. You've also got your interactive devices, of course, which allow live voting throughout the day, as well as providing logistic information and the agenda of your day. So I think before we begin, let's just have a bit of a play with the devices, warm you up a little bit, and get you talking to each other. I've got a quick question I'm going to put to you. So feel free to discuss this amongst yourselves, have a quick chat. The question then, do you think you are already a philanthrepreneur? Do you think you are already a philanthrepreneur? So 1, yes, definitely. 2, I'll tell you at the end of the day. 3, I'd love to be, but I'm not sure I qualify. And we put that in because actually, having had a chat with some people yesterday, that was the answer that they gave me. So we're just going to have a play around for the devices, have a chat, give us the answers, and we'll make sure that our devices are actually working for starters. I love the pressure of the clock. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. So evenly split. Okay, I like it. So the yes, definitely's, I think front row, I'm kind of thinking that you guys are like, yeah, definitely. Maybe for those of you, I know some of you were here last year, so I know that you've already been putting everything into good practice. I'll tell you at the end of the day, I'd like to hear that, so come find me and let me know what you think. And I'd love to be, but I'm not sure I qualify. That interests me most, actually. So I'd love to, if we can, I don't know if we're going to have time to do it, but I'd love to do it at the end of the day and see if we've convinced all of you that you are already a philanthrepreneur. Because actually, in my view, if you look at the definition of what a philanthrepreneur is, generally it's about all of us making a difference. Then we are all here because we are wanting to, at least, if not already, making a difference. So my book would say that we are all already doing it. Thank you for that. Let us begin formally then now by welcoming the founding force behind this extraordinary initiative, His Excellency, Ahmad Dabbagh.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends and collaborators, welcome to the second annual Philanthropreneurship Forum. We are proud to be hosting this year's event in France. France, a great nation guided by noble principles, liberty, equality, fraternity. 1 month has passed since the tragic events in Paris. Since the fateful day, we have witnessed remarkable French resilience. Proof that the will to live free cannot be diminished by the threat of violence. This resilience served as a sign for us to move forward with our plans. And your presence here proves that we will not allow fear to derail us from our important work. In solidarity with the French people, I ask you to join me in a moment of silence in memory of all those innocent souls who lost their lives. Now more than ever, we must be philanthropreneurs, embracing entrepreneurial mindset to disrupt the status quo. That is the raison d'être of our forum, to bring this community of passionate leaders together to build a better world. And we gather together in France. Yes, there is no better place to be convening this year's forum. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of this nation's greatest philosophers, once said, "The world of reality has its limits. The world of imagination is boundless." May we use our gathering today in Versailles as our world of imagination, a stimulating space where boundless ideas spring forth, a magical space where philanthropreneurship flourishes. Philanthropreneurship, where entrepreneurial mindset meets giving. But in a world of widening divisions, a world of conflict and violence, a world of uncertainty for individuals, families, governments, faiths, we need more than philanthropreneurship. We need omnipreneurship. That's the title of my next book, coming out in May, Omnipreneurship, an Organized Approach to Living a Life of Meaning. I wrote Omnipreneurship for everyone. I wrote it because segmented approaches have not been successful in delivering holistic solutions. The book offers principles, values, and 10 golden rules designed to help leaders in all walks of life, governmentpreneurs, familypreneurs, businesspreneurs, faithpreneurs, and of course, philanthropreneurs. Right now, the world needs leaders who are capable and committed, omnipreneurs who can fix broken systems that favor inequity, poverty over equity, and opportunity. Turning back to our Philanthropreneurship Forum, last year we focused on strategies to increase impact, scale, and sustainability of our philanthropic efforts. One new initiative was announced from this stage, Philanthropy University. Little did we know what we were getting into. Just 12 months later, Philanthropy University has become a force for good. In partnership with UC Berkeley Haas School of Business, Philanthropy University offers world-class instruction to empower leaders of NGOs. We have just completed the first cycle of courses offering capacity building in skills critical for success in the social sector: strategy, fundraising, leadership, and more. We attracted over 400,000 enrollments, more than half of them millennials, with learners representing more than 190 countries, from Brazil to Papua New Guinea, Senegal to Vietnam. With us today, we have Philanthropy University graduates and instructors, as well as members of our curriculum committee. Let's welcome them. Philanthropy University's success is largely driven by the power of technology. Technology that allows us to deliver impact at scale. This success has inspired us to expand the vision of our umbrella giving platform, STARS Foundation, which will now operate out of Silicon Valley with an expanded team and a goal of leveraging this global technology hub. Before turning to today's program, there are two more developments that factor into our thinking. First, of course, is the news coming out of Paris and the COP21. Exciting news that gives us hope that the world can collaborate for change. And since we last met, the UN adopted an ambitious set of sustainable development goals. No doubt, philanthropy and sustainable development are completely linked to one another. And success will require a greater level of thoughtful collaboration than ever before. We have an opportunity here to lead the thinking, to be the players and partners who shape the future of philanthropy and sustainable development. And so, turning to our agenda, taking the stage, we have a spectacular group of participants who represent the very essence of compassion and action. Our theme, New Frontiers of Philanthropy, will explore how we reimagine corporate giving, in fact, all giving, to be more robust and strategic. Our agenda is informed by 7 co-chairs who have given their time, their ideas, and their energy to help us widen our community of philanthropreneurs. We are indebted to them. We also have you, each and every person who has traveled here to be a part of this community of do-gooders and do-givers. I thank you all for being here. We began this journey a year ago and will continue walking this path, learning from each new host city, gathering supporters and partners, and blazing a trail of positive impact as we discover new frontiers of philanthropy. And so, I return to the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, French ideals worthy of every global citizen. Philanthropreneurship will help us spread these ideals. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Commitment is an act, not a word." So without further ado, let's act. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much indeed. Now I would like to call on stage our French hostess for this event to say a few words in French. Okay then. Please now give a very warm welcome to Her Excellency Rachida Dati, Member of the European Parliament, former French Minister of Justice, it's a long one, sorry, and Mayor of the 7th District of Paris.
Monsieur le Président, Excellence, Madame la Vice-Présidente, chère Chelsea. Mr. Chairman, Excellency, Madam Vice Chairman, dear Chelsea, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to welcome you here in France. I would like to extend my warmest welcome. It is a real privilege to open this conference. I should like to thank you, Excellency, for the kind words, the tribute you have paid to the victims and their families after the terrorist attacks that we suffered a couple of weeks ago. I should also like to thank you for the tribute you have paid to France, its culture. And indeed, these are words of optimism because we shall not be intimidated by such barbaric acts. And I should also like to thank you for your invitation and this initiative of organizing this forum. I know that you're a very modest person, but I would like to pay tribute to you. You have given your time, your money, your energy, indeed your own person to see through projects in favor of the younger generation so that they can be able to achieve their ambitions. You are before us the very epitome of this fine world, philanthropreneurship, which brings us together. And you go well beyond corporate giving because you innovate, you invest, you're full of ideas to the service of others, and you are driven by a rallying entrepreneurial momentum. With you, philanthropy is more than just a word. It is a very promising societal model. And today there's a real question, a real issue about the incapacity of politicians to change the lives of our citizens. People are exasperated by this lack of action. There's a loss of trust and confidence. Politicians have to question their own doing, and I can see this today here in France. Politicians should open up to the world, should open up to others, but they should also be able to make good on the promises they make. But this self-questioning should not be limited to politicians. We have witnessed all sorts of crises: financial crisis, economic crisis, a social, political, and moral crisis, and today we have a security crisis. All men and women of goodwill must come together, and since we're discussing the new frontiers of philanthropy, I hope that our response should be that there should be no frontiers, no borders. When we have states facing crises, politicians who do not inspire any more confidence, with the distrust, the old borders between public and private, the third sector, these borders should no longer exist. Excellency, you enable us to overcome this divide by talking about this new concept, governorpreneurship, that is when the private sector, competitive private sector, works hand in hand with an enterprising government, a modern and visionary government looking for a better society. I'm well aware that France is way behind. It's the 74th country in terms of philanthropy, way after the Netherlands, number 7, Britain, number 6, or indeed the United States, that are number 2. France is falling way behind when it comes to corporate social responsibility. All too often people rely on the state. Private initiative is discouraged because it is seen to be cynical or even suspicious. And of course, cultural revolution must take place in favor of corporate social responsibility. In France, we have one of the highest unemployment rate for the young. Inequality is getting worse at school. Too many young people drop out of school and drop out of society altogether. Now, of course, we have the concern of security as well. And so the policies for the youth and for culture are then put on the back burner, and yet they are decisive for the future of the country. There's lots to do, but unfortunately, states have less and less money unless they decide to raise taxes massively, but that doesn't necessarily mean they will achieve anything. And so, Excellency, one of your mottos is the next big thing, and your action proposes to question the status quo, and you went further than that, saying that you have philanthropreneurship and governorpreneurship. Of course, government has obligation to the third sector as well, but it's time to move in favor of society. You proved this yourself with your initiatives, the STARS Foundation and many others. There's Philanthropy University that you mentioned. This is a world premiere. This is an online free education platform accessible to all with some of the best teachers of the world, and you decided to share excellence with the rest of the world. With this university, social condition, social origins becomes secondary. Access to excellence is no longer a status of status, income, or indeed background. It is rather unusual, indeed it is exceptional, and this really should be highlighted here, and I do know what I'm talking about. Today, 24 representatives of NGOs are here to present the STARS Impact Award. These associations work with children in trouble and help in the field of education, health, access to water. These associations are the best in their fields and have a significant impact in their local communities, and that is why the STARS Foundation is encouraging them and rewarding them today. And we can see that more and more successful entrepreneurs propose to engage with society, call upon it to act, to innovate, to become philanthropreneurs. It's not just a matter of making gifts, even though it is essential. We're talking here about a new generation of philanthropists and entrepreneurs that work hard to create, to facilitate ambitions, to create, make it possible to achieve these ambitions. And there's one area where this is crucial, and there's youth. Youth is a great challenge of the 21st century, both for Western and developing countries. And very often the youth were left behind. They were often despised. Sometimes not enough is being done for the younger generation. And in 30 years, the situation has gotten even worse. My own background, in view of my own origins, my own social conditions, and that of my parent, it would be impossible. Such a journey would be impossible today. I was fortunate, but it does mean that governments or politicians and the private sector are liable for this, and we should stop waving aside the younger who come from underprivileged backgrounds that didn't have a structured family, were not able to build their own education and their own destinies. And amongst these young people, many do want to work. Many are dynamic, they are creative, they are willing to work. And in chance, like in other countries, the time has come to give them a second chance, either supporting them through to work or giving them the wherewithal to have an apprenticeship. And so we should give the younger generation a framework that enables them to be better included in our societies. I talk here to young entrepreneurs. You know this better than anyone else, and Your Excellency knows you know this better than anyone else. These younger can be an asset, a human and economic asset for societies, not just economically, but also for peace in the world, because peace is so much challenged in the world today. I know, of course, that if you're here, it is because you are committed. You know what lies behind this commitment, and I know we are preaching to the choir, but I should say that not everybody was fully convinced that they were of the right stuff to be a philanthropreneur. And I would like to talk to them, and there are not enough of you. We should have 15, 20 Palais des Congrès to bring together all those who can make a difference, because it is all too easy to take advantage of the tax or regulatory framework or the good state of the economy so as not to be really involved in the future of society, because you can have a comfortable position, but we have to come out of the envelope rather than giving money to give yourself a clear conscience or achieved some sort of a tax advantage that simply keeps going the old system of welfare, which is not getting anywhere. So it is better to come up with a new and stronger idea of the importance of your action, your commitments, to go beyond the business as usual. This forum, because of the themes that will be addressed, the quality and the level, of course, of panelists, is the best example of this. Myself, as a European MP, I can see that European countries that have their own histories and cultures are now facing common challenges. Youth and their integration in their respective societies is one such challenge. But I also know that we are facing sharing these challenges with other countries beyond the frontiers of Europe. And for all those listening to us, to all the men and women of goodwill, for all those who are committed, those who have been enjoying your own support, it is for us to see to it that this forum should really be the image of the French dream, because here we are in France, after all, so that everyone can have access to that French dream. And based on the model that you started, Excellency, it is for us to build a global initiative, making it possible for the younger generation to get a job, to go to school, to go through apprenticeships or learning, access to culture. And this initiative should work hand in hand with the third sector and public authorities. With the public sector, it is true that we're at this stage still experimenting in certain parts of the world. But since I said that I propose to push further the borders, the frontiers of philanthropy, let's see things in the big picture. Let's open up to the younger generation, give them access to knowledge, education, social inclusion. We should go beyond declarations of intent. In each of our countries, dreams should come true thanks to work, energy, ambition, and of course, the gift of yourself. You have reinvented philanthropy, Excellency. Philanthropy, and you show it, is not just a matter of a tax break. It is a joint responsibility which you have to accept. One of your phrases I found, Excellency, in your book is I promise and I deliver. And that is the key. That is the magic formula to make dreams come true. Thank you so very much.
Your Excellency, thank you, merci. And may I now please ask you to give a very warm welcome to Dr. Chelsea Clinton, Vice Chair of the Clinton Foundation. Dr. Clinton.
Thank you, Kate, for that warm welcome and for your stewardship of the conference today. Thank you to Amr and everyone here at the forum for convening us today. I know that events like this are truly a team sport. So I just want to thank everyone who we might see today, but also everyone behind the scenes, including the nice gentleman who just raised the microphones for me. To ensure that today runs smoothly. I want to thank Dr. Laura Tyson, who will be joining me on stage in a few minutes. She's someone I have long admired, not only for her work on behalf of our country, but now at the Haas School of Business for her work on behalf of our future. So even though it hurts my Stanford heart that she's at Berkeley, I'm grateful for all that she's doing with Philanthropy University and to reimagine and reinvent what business education should be in the 21st century. I also want to echo what Amr said and to say how grateful I am to be in Paris and to be in France. I could not imagine a better place for this day than in a city and a country that have long defined what it means to be creative and inventive and to be looking toward our shared future and not a broken past. So I know it is serendipity that has brought us here today instead of to London or another city, but I am profoundly grateful that we are here today. I could not imagine a better repudiation to the violence and a stronger statement for the world that we all want to be a part of. Before Laura joins me on stage, I want to exploit my position at the podium to share a bit about the Clinton Foundation and how we think of being philanthropreneurs and how we're certainly always trying to break down frontiers and to do what we believe NGOs are most well positioned to do, to close the gap between what the private sector is currently incentivized to produce because there's a robust business case and what the public sector can provide given its own budget, something that we heard from Her Excellency are not expected to expand in France or the United States or elsewhere in the coming years. I know that some of you heard my father speak last year at the closing session of this conference, and I am grateful to continue the family tradition of support and participation, and will sort of impose on your patience for sharing a little bit about the Foundation's origins, but also some of the work that I am most closely engaged in. When my father left the White House, he, as he has said quite publicly, didn't know how best to continue to use the skills and talents and the convening power that he had acquired over his life in public service as hopefully still a meaningful, impactful private citizen. He decided to engage in HIV/AIDS through conversations with President Mandela, but at the time, he wasn't quite sure how that engagement would take shape to have maximum impact. And it wasn't until he was asked by the then Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis to help his Caribbean nation that at the time was suffering from an HIV burden of almost 10%, that he realized that he had found his first NGO opportunity to try to change the AIDS medicines market from being characterized by a dynamic of high price and low volume to one of being high volume and low price. That work still continues today, but even more, that ethos is what has shaped all of the work that we do at the Foundation, looking to close the gap between the private sector and the public sector, looking for sustainable solutions so that you don't have to choose between philanthropy and business, and hopefully working ourselves out of a job. So if we look at the work of the Foundation in AIDS in particular, the work that my father started now more than a dozen years ago had its most recent expression on World AIDS Day a couple of weeks ago, when we announced in partnership with UNAIDS and the US PEPFAR program, the newest 3 drugs to now be available for less than $100 per person per year to treat adults with HIV and less than $60 per person per year for children. That will lower the global average in the developing world beneath $100. Currently, 9.9 million of the 16 million people in the developing world on antiretroviral medicines acquire them through contracts that the Clinton Foundation first helped negotiate. We hope that this newest round of announced agreements will help us get to more than 20 million people on treatment over the next 5 years. Oh, thank you. And when my father began this work, there was great, not even just skepticism, but cynicism. Fewer than 200,000 people in the developing world were on antiretrovirals, and no one believed that the model could change. Clearly, we've proved to the contrary, that if we shine a light on a challenge and convene the right partners, we can find durable and successful solutions. When my mother and I started working together at the Clinton Foundation a couple of years ago, we hoped to do the same around the status of rights and opportunities for women and girls. And we found a strong partner in Melinda Gates. And we launched something called No Ceilings, the Full Participation Project. And we were determined to aggregate together the largest set of data ever collected on one single technological standard and platform, the status of rights and opportunities for women and girls in every member country of the United Nations. And what we launched in March was just that. We brought together conventional development data partners like Paris's own OECD, the UN system, the World Bank, and less conventional data partners, at least in development, like Google and the telecom industry across the developing world. And what we found was not surprising, but hopefully helped more people become aware of the ceilings that girls and women still face in every country, but also the powerful investment that girls and women represent, not only for themselves and their families, but for their country's economy and our world. And we also thought it was important in the same way that Her Excellency was candid about the challenges that she faces here in France, that we be candid about the challenges that we face in the United States. So often conversations about girls and women focus on what is happening elsewhere. And yet we know in the United States now that the US is one of only 9 countries in the world to not have paid time off for mothers of new infants. And our cohort are not countries like France, but largely small island nation states in the South Pacific who don't have the same economic heft that we do to make such investments. So clearly for us, it's an ethical and not an economic decision. The US is also one of only 13 countries to see rising maternal mortality rates. I think that's shameful, and it's something that we felt obligated to shine a light on. But shining a light on a challenge has to only be the first step to trying to solve it. So in the US, we've been working at the state and national level to not only raise awareness, but to convene the right partners to try to tackle the root causes of maternal mortality, to advocate for local and state movement on paid time off for new mothers, if not at the actual federal level, while also working to improve and empower the lives of girls and women around the world. So 2 just brief examples. Our Clinton Development Initiative focuses on changing the economics around smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa. In Malawi, for example, we're working with more than 55,000 farmers, almost 45% of whom are women. We know that if women in sub-Saharan Africa had access to the same quality seed and fertilizer that their male farmer counterparts do, that sub-Saharan Africa could feed itself. So just imagine if women farmers had access, and male farmers as well, to even higher quality seed and fertilizer and the technical training on things like crop rotation that helped revolutionize farming hundreds of years ago here in France and the United States. Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're putting together farming cooperatives so that the farmers can better negotiate for higher quality seed and fertilizer at lower prices. And we're helping train farmers in crop rotation so that they're able to provide their own families with a more diverse diet, as well as have a greater diversity of cash crops to then sell both into their local markets as well as for export. And we're proud of the fact that for farmers that have been in our program for at least 3 years or longer, that they have close to tripled their income. The focus on women farmers is particularly important, as I'm sure that many of you know. Women that are able to have their own income streams, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, are more likely to then use that money to send their children to school, but also to diversify their economic position. Our female farmers have done everything from open mobile phone card stores with their additional income to buy cows and chicken. So clearly, it's not only the right thing for their families, but the right thing for their societies, and ultimately the right thing for our global food security. The second brief example is our entrepreneurship model. We started working a few years ago in Peru and Colombia, and now in Haiti, to help women become the answer to the last mile challenge. Working with Quaker and Nestle and Pepsi and other large companies, we were able to secure product discounts for women to then take those products on consignment, whether personal care products like soap or feminine hygiene, or cereals that could be stored and last for longer to help feed her household or those of her neighbors, that she's able to take those products on consignment and then sell them, whether in the far reaches of the Andes or the internal plateau of Haiti. We found that our women entrepreneurs are now making close to $1,000 a year on average. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but given that the vast majority of women were unemployed before, it's a significant step up for themselves and their family. And Amr mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. Unilever, with the Clinton Foundation, the UK's Department for International Development, more colloquially known as DFID, were part of the Secretary General's first announcement of commitments around the SDGs. Unilever is committing up to $10 million to expand the entrepreneurial model in West Africa and in India. Now, I think they're doing that because they think it's the right thing to do, but I also know they're doing it because they think it's a smart thing to do. All of our women entrepreneurs will now be selling Unilever soap and other products. I think this is the classic example of doing well while also doing good. So clearly, we at the Clinton Foundation and in my family have great resonance and respect for reimagining what both philanthropy, and entrepreneurship should each mean, but even more what their marriage should be. It's why I'm so grateful and privileged to be here today, particularly to be in Paris and to be in France. So thank you all for inviting me. I look forward to learning alongside you today and now to talking to Laura about whatever she may ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'd like to take a seat, Dr. Clinton. And thank you for shining your light through the Clinton Foundation and promoting health and, as you say, raising equality for women and children. Thank you very much. Please do take a seat. And, of course, you mentioned Laura. Maybe I should just leave you to it. Dr. Laura Tyson, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much. It's a great thrill to be here. First of all, I want to again thank His Excellency Dabbagh for bringing us all here together at this historic moment in this historic place to talk about the future. And I want to say also I've had that great honor of working with the Clintons for many, many years. It's been a very, very important part of my life and a very, very important part of the US and, of course, the global economy. And I think I start, Chelsea, with, I really think of the Clinton Foundation itself and the Clinton Global Initiative as brilliant examples of entrepreneurship. These are relatively new organizations that have had massive scale impact in a very short period of time. They didn't exist just a few years ago. They had no resources. So in thinking about this and some of your examples, if you were giving a course in Philanthropy University to say, okay, here are the defining characteristics that you should look at, defining features to setting up a successful new global reach philanthropic organization, what are the lessons, what are the features from the Clinton experience?
Well, I think first you have to start with what question you're trying to solve. And then I think you have to have a sense of what you believe the end goal or exit strategy should be. Okay. Because I think too often kind of NGOs become their own worst enemy to their mission, often for very understandable and laudable reasons, which is why we always try to have a sense of what we think kind of the exit will be, either kind of into the public sector or to the private sector. For example, going back to our entrepreneurship model, we hope that they will become independent, self-sustaining businesses that we will have no part of. Similarly, the Malawian farmer example, we expect the farming cooperatives in about 2 or 3 years to be self-sustaining. And so we will be able to engage then more in Tanzania and Rwanda, where we're already working, and in Kenya, where we expect to start working soon. So I think those are kind of the first kind of tranche of questions. I think the second is who should your partners be? Who should be your partners from the private sector or the public sector? And I think we have to start with where we find ourselves, not with kind of where we would wish to be or what may be the most pure answer. And that leads me to think about our work around childhood obesity in the United States, where my father had quadruple bypass surgery now more than a decade ago. And when he recovered, he called the American Heart Association and he said, what can I do to be helpful in heart health? And I think he thought they were going to say, be the poster child for why men should call the doctor when they have chest pains. Because although women suffer a greater burden of heart disease in the United States, heart disease is more likely to be fatal for men, often because they delay going to the doctor when they have chest pain or kind of other telltale signs of a heart attack or cardiac arrest. And they did say that, but they also said, please help us with childhood obesity. And at the time, there wasn't great awareness, as there is today, where sadly 2 out of 3 children in America are overweight or obese, just a shocking percentage of our young people. And so he took the same approach to the food system and the activity system in which kids largely live, in other words, through their school environments, that he'd taken with HIV/AIDS. And so first, the foundation started to work with school districts to aggregate them together so that they would have more purchasing clout when facing the food distributor, so they could buy healthier food for the same budget allocation. And then figuring out ways to get physical education back into schools. But a couple of years ago, we realized that although kids spend tens of thousands of hours over their lives in school, they also spend a lot of time not in school. And particularly for low-income children in America, and I'm sorry I don't know the commensurate statistic for France, but low-income children in America eat at least 1 meal a week in a fast food restaurant.
And so we went to McDonald's, which is the largest fast food restaurant in America, and we brokered a voluntary agreement where they decided for the Happy Meals in the US, but also in France and their other kind of 18 largest markets, to switch the default option from French fries to apples, and from soda to milk, to low-fat milk. And last year, that meant that in the US, there were 15 million more apples purchased through Happy Meals. And we believe that small changes like that really add up. And we were really criticized for working with McDonald's. But if you want to change what kids are eating, you have to go to where they're eating. So I would just say, thinking about kind of not only the question that you want to solve and what you think your exit strategy is or what success looks like, but also then who are your partners that you need to get there, because they may be in unlikely places, but the unlikely partners are arguably the most important.
So I think partnership has absolutely been a critical feature, as you say, of the success of the foundation and the initiative. The partner that you also mentioned in your opening remarks was obviously also the partner of government. And I know, for example, again, on a focus strategy, you can talk about another one, but I know that the foundation has been deeply involved in the rebuild of Haiti after the earthquake, obviously working with not just the government there, but with government organizations around the world. So talk a little bit about that. You mentioned that you were criticized for working with McDonald's. There's the issue of the uneasy partnerships oftentimes between philanthropies and market-based corporates or market-based businesses. There's also sometimes the tension between a philanthropy and a government. So talk a little bit about how you deal in that partnership
Absolutely.
space.
I mean, we think you have to work with the government, particularly when you're working in areas like health, in which, in much of the world, not only do government ministries of health sort of set the parameters around kind of what healthcare means in a given country environment, but also are responsible for delivering healthcare, different from what we have in the United States. So we think if you're going to engage in areas like global health, you have an obligation to work with government. So we actually only work in countries where we can work in partnership with governments, and hopefully are kind of always working to expand the capacity of governments so that they need us less and less. I mentioned our newest round of drug purchase agreements that were announced. Although we continue to partner directly with the kind of generic and branded pharmaceutical industry, we increasingly no longer do the actual negotiations between the governments and the pharmaceutical industry, because the government ministries of finance and health are now able to do those negotiations themselves. So we think that's a good paradigm, because not only is that then a set of skills that they can apply to AIDS medicines, it's something that they can apply to other health commodities as well, whether vaccines or malaria, prophylactic bed nets, or tuberculosis medicines, or other things. So we are, absolutely, Laura, continually criticized for that as well, not only in Haiti, but around the world. But we think it's the right answer, not only for us, but candidly for any NGO who ultimately works in another country at the privilege and the either overt or implicit invitation of the government.
I was told there was going to be a clock, but I can't see it, and I definitely do not want to miss the opportunity to ask you about your book and your book tour. So Chelsea has written a very compelling new book. It's a deliberation with her generation about the kinds of issues we're talking about here today: philanthropreneurship, giving, developing a life which has meaning to give to the rest of the world. I wanted to get a sense of your book tour and what you're finding out from your generation as you go through selling these ideas.
Well, thank you, Laura. I didn't know I was going to get a chance to talk about this, but I'm so grateful that I am. So I wrote a book called It's Your World, and it actually is targeted to 10 to 14-year-olds. But I now have been out on a book tour across the United States and have met people younger and older who've been reading it. And I wrote it for a couple of reasons. I wrote it, one, because when I was about that age, I read a book that had a huge impact on me called 50 Simple Things Kids Can Do to Save the Earth. And it had such a big impact on me because it treated me seriously. It didn't kind of talk down to me. It wasn't overly didactic. It didn't talk to me as just a kid. It treated me as someone who deserved to know about climate change and global warming and acid rain and pollution. But it also empowered me with real practical suggestions of things that I could do as a little girl in Little Rock, Arkansas at the time to make a difference, whether that was to help start my school's first paper recycling program or to obsessively cut up the plastic rings that come around soda cans, because I learned from reading the book that trash, like the plastic rings around soda cans from places like Arkansas, were killing marine wildlife around the world. And I was horrified by that and thought, well, at least I can change my footprint before we had that kind of idea of footprint. And I went looking for a book like that that had been written about not only the environment today, but other contemporary issues, and I couldn't really find that, so I decided to write one. And the second reason I wrote it was because I thought, or at least I hoped, that there would be a real audience for it, because whenever I talk to young people, I'm always struck by how curious kids are and how much more attentive they are than I think they're often given credit for, at least in kind of the American cultural psyche, for being interested and engaged in what's happening in their own communities as well as around the world. So I wrote about poverty in the US and around the world, climate change, the rights of opportunities and lack of rights of opportunities for women and girls, and a variety of other issues, but also to highlight some practical suggestions of things that kids could do to make a difference in those areas, in their neighborhood or around the globe.
So the book was, as you pointed out, targeted to the younger generation. However, you are clearly in the leadership group of the millennial generation. And we hear all the time, there probably aren't that many millennials in the room, but we hear all the time that the millennial generation has a different set of motivations. Many, many examples I hear all the time in the US. Students going to business school and, say, taking social entrepreneurship. Students going to work for companies because of their corporate sustainability programs. Students looking from the beginning to find employment which has sustainability, as well as employability, as well as income. So talk a little bit about the when you're on this book tour in the millennial generation, do you really think the psyche is changing in a way which obviously you exemplify, but I was wondering how you feel about your generation?
No, I completely resonate on an anecdotal level with what you talk about kind of from a macro level, in that I certainly see, and I see this particularly through the Clinton Global Initiative University, which is our program to bring together young change makers at the college and university levels. And we're so excited to be at Berkeley for our next meeting in the spring, where we bring together about 1,100 college change makers so that they can network together, but also learn skills about how to think of writing a business plan, or how to think about the appropriate uses of social media as well as the inappropriate uses of social media when they're trying to raise awareness or raise funds for their work, and a myriad of other kind of related skills-based training. And I think that the CGIU community, where we've now had thousands of students since the first meeting almost 10 years ago, make equally thousands of commitments, many of which have been continued by the students who have followed them at their schools, is the greatest repudiation to kind of this, I think, kind of social myth that the millennials are disengaged, disinterested, and disaffected, because I actually find the millennials are really engaged, really affected by what's happening, and really motivated to make a difference. They're just engaged in different ways than their parents or grandparents were.
So a lot of the discussion today will, of course, be about thinking about how the ways of engagement are changing because of the technology.
Absolutely. So, and I think that's hugely important. I also think it is important, though, to still consider kind of conventional forms of engagement. And as Laura mentioned, I have been out on this book tour, and in every city that I've gone to a public middle school, largely. Fantastic. And in almost every city that I've been to, in almost every school setting, I've been asked the following question. do you have any plans to run for public office? Now, I understand why I'm asked that question. Right. My last name's Clinton. I have a father who was president. I have a mother who's running for president. I also have been, oh, thank you, yes. I'm very biased towards my parents. But I also have been asked that question my whole life. One of my earliest memories is being 3 years old. My father was campaigning for governor, and I was standing on the side of the rally, and I was waving an American flag, because when you're 3, you can't participate much more than just sort of enthusiastically waving an American flag. And a woman said to me, Chelsea, do you want to grow up and be governor of Arkansas? And I think I said something like, ma'am, I'm 3. Now, I have a different answer today, which is that I believe kind of my highest and best use at the moment is through the Clinton Foundation, and I also am lucky to live in a city, in a state, in a country where I support my elected leaders. But if at some point the latter weren't true, and I were disappointed as a citizen and now as a mother, kind of with the leadership in my city or my state or my country, I'd have to ask and answer the question, do I think I would be able to make the most positive impact on the issues that I care about through the public sector? But I always say to the kids, I am not the only person in this room who should be asking myself that question on a regular basis. Every one of you should be asking yourself that question. And I think while we focus on the real, still untapped potential of philanthropreneurship, it's really important that people don't forget about government. And none of my friends have any interest in running for public office. And I think that's really disappointing. Many of my friends who have biographies that conventionally would indicate they at least might have some interest. My friends who have been decorated and served honorably in the military. My friends who have had distinguished legal careers. My friends who are really breaking boundaries in the NGO and philanthropic sectors. My friends who are kind of already leading medical practices in hospitals, right? Each of those biographies kind of 30 or 40 years ago would have led someone to at least think or be interrogated by their friends and family, do you think that you might run for president one day, or run for mayor, or run for your local school board? None of my friends asked themselves that question, or really asked that question except for when I pestered them. Because I think it's really important that we don't forget the power, still the unique power, of the public sector to make a difference on the areas that clearly each of us care about.
So that's a very, very important point. I'm so happy you brought it up. I mean, as an educator in higher education almost my entire life, I have worried about this more and more for exactly the reasons you're saying. Highly talented individuals have the view that this is not a place where they can have impact, which is completely wrong. I mean, the public sector it's still, relative to everything we're going to talk about today, the extent of resources, the extent of making changes which will have massive impact both in a country and around the world, those are not shared by, the power is not shared by a philanthropy, even the most effective one, or by a business. So it's really important that we educate these future leaders, encourage them. I would say I had the wonderful experience of leading an immersion class in Washington, D.C. just the week before I came here. Executive MBA students, average age about 37. Here's the good news. I immersed them in Washington, and at the end, I would say about a third of them said, you know, I was so inspired. I think I'm at least going to look for a way to do a stint in government, you know, a kind of advisory. So sometimes you don't want to run for office, but you might want to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so anyway, very important. I think let's end here because we're at really discussing education, and we really haven't, we talked a lot about some of the other areas where the foundation has been very instrumental, but clearly in whether it's women and girls' employability, health, education is key. So what are some of the lessons, insights in terms of what the foundation has tried to do in education that you can share with the audience?
Well, I think it's important to think about sort of three things when we think about education. One, if we think about just the education system that we have today, we have made tremendous progress in getting more kids into school around the world. Mm-hmm. We've gotten about 100 more kids into school around the world in the last 25 years. But we still have about 100 million kids who aren't in school. And they're not in school for a lot of reasons. They're not in school because there aren't schools for them to go to. We need hundreds of thousands of more classrooms. There aren't teachers to teach them. We need millions of more teachers. They are disabled and they're not in a place that can accommodate their physical or mental challenges, or they're girls. Child marriage is a major barrier to girls being enrolled through the end of secondary school. There is, not surprisingly, a strong correlation between countries that have not made child marriage illegal and whether or not girls are literate or graduate from high school. So I think when we think about kind of education holistically and we think about all we need to do to try to help grow more global citizens through things like Philanthropy University or the Clinton Global Initiative University, we can't forget the fact that we still need more kids in school. And while we solve for that challenge, hopefully we're also solving for the quality challenge of the education they're gonna get. I think the second thing is what we've been talking about, that we need our higher education system, as well as hopefully also our primary and secondary education system, to look like the world today. You know, we need more team and problem-based learning, and we also need, in the same way that we've heard already spoken about this morning, sort of a frontierless way of thinking, so that whether you're in business school or law school or medical school, you kind of understand that you're existing in this larger ecosystem, and you'll be, I think, smarter and a better practitioner. But I think the third thing, and this is really where the Clinton Foundation now does a lot of work in the US, is that education starts much earlier than formal schooling begins. We now know that 80% of our brains are built by the time we're 3. And so, you know, in my house, we obsessively kind of read and talk to our daughter, and I'm sure that her first sentence will be something like, you know, please be quiet, I need time to myself. But we know that that's so important, and so we have launched both national campaigns in partnership with NBC Universal and Univision and other media partners to raise awareness about how important even 15 minutes of reading, singing, or talking to your child is to help build that early kind of brain scaffolding, as well as doing concentrated efforts in New York and Oakland and in Oklahoma City, so that mothers largely are inundated and supported with information on how best to do that, including when they leave the hospital after giving birth. So in the same way that mothers across the country leave hospitals in the United States with nutritional information, in the cities that we have built deeper partnerships, every mother now leaves with educational information and real simple strategies of how to do that, and that it's important to do that in whatever language they're most comfortable in. That talking to your child in Spanish or Mandarin isn't going to inhibit their ability to later learn English and to succeed in the public school system in the United States. In fact, it's going to help them do that. So I think we need just greater awareness of that and greater sort of social investment. And again, I think that's an area where government is uniquely positioned to play a powerful role.
So remember, in the Clinton Global Initiative meeting in September, there was the International Business School competitions, and the winner was a fascinating example of an entrepreneurial idea would create employment for the population, very low-income population, but employment for the population essentially to help in early childhood education. So recognition around the world that this is a key area to invest. And when you invest, whether it's the private sector or the public sector, you create employment opportunities as well as educational opportunities.
Well, I see our time is up, but I will say China's going to enroll every 4-year-old in school by 2020, and they're going to try to enroll every 3-year-old in school by 2035.
Fantastic.
That's and they're doing that, I think, because not only are they aware of the same science that kind of we talked about, and they've brought James Hickman, who is a Nobel Prize-winning economist from the University of Chicago, an institution not exactly known for being a progressive place.
But market-based.
But market-based.
They are market-based.
And Professor Hickman's been working with the Chinese government. And I think they've recognized it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do, given the clear return on investment that they will reap from having kind of more of their kids engaged in formal education earlier and earlier. It's the right thing to do, but it's also, from a long-term competitive standpoint, the smart thing to do.
So that is fantastic. And I think I would just tie it back to what you said at the beginning, some of the defining features of the success of the Clinton Foundation. You choose something, shine a light on it, focus on it. You come up with an exit strategy. In this case, the goal is all around the world to deal with this issue of early childhood education. There are going to be different formulas for dealing with it. Again, then it gets to your partners. It is a private sector partner, a public sector partner, but you actually, with the focus and the partnerships and a goal which is common across societies, you engage in a global mission to address that challenge. It's a fantastic, you're doing a fantastic job. You are a wonderful representative of the foundation, of your family, of your generation. We're all very honored to have you with us.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Chelsea Clinton. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And I would actually say, Dr. Clinton, because I think whether or not Dr. Clinton decides to go into politics or not, I think just hearing that question asked of our children, and we do it, Dr. Clinton is obviously doing it, that's obviously got to be the key to getting them to think about going into politics. As you say, unless you've maybe got family members or a good example set, then you might not consider it. So thank you very much indeed. It was a hugely inspiring and engaging session. Thank you.